Why don't we have a round of discussion also through the crowd, through the audience, and you can ask questions as well. We'll pass around the mic. In terms of transportation, if you have, again, sort of two-story transportation, or you could have another elevator transportation on bridges above the regular traffic. And if there is transportation, public transportation can be on top on the bridges, and the regular traffic can be down below. You don't have to necessarily create a subway. So we can actually double or even triple the number of opportunities on the road and prevent congestion. I'm not an expert on transportation. We have examined the different topics, the different suggestions. There are a lot of discussions regarding different transportation options, the SkyTrain and others. Somebody sent me on Facebook, actually, it's a new idea of this huge bus with these wheels through which, that the vehicles can actually go through the huge wheels. A lot of ideas. And we need helicopters, flying vehicles. Yeah, there are all sorts of ideas. So we take all these things into account, of course. The experts take it into account. I'm not an expert. But what is, again, we know about the congestion, the traffic congestion in the central part of Israel. It's awful. And if it is treated well, then things can be much better. I just want to share a thought with you. A thought that came up when you presented all the different figures. And my main impression was that the economists respond. They don't actually even think of initiating important things. No connection to the government or no connection to taxes. They don't initiate big things as things were once initiated, let's say 40 years ago here in Israel. Half of the country is empty. Again, from economic point of view, you can initiate, again, building up the Negev. I'm not even talking about cost, whether it's 20 billion or 40 billion or whatever. I don't know where the money's going to come from, but that's what you have to do. But think bigger. Think about big things. Think about 20 kids per classroom. When I learned, there were 15 kids in a classroom. Today there are 40 students in the classroom. So don't, deal with the little nitty-gritty, and you so know well how to do that. But how about tackling the bigger picture? Half of the country is empty. That's a fact. Why don't you do something about it? The plan that was presented here, I think the big difference is that the Van Leer proposal for economy and society actually gives response to social goals, bringing down poverty, creating equality. And I think the Bank of Israel's answer is no, until by the Prime Minister's office. Okay, the National Council for Economy relates to a static situation. As if, the politicians have decided, so what can we do within this framework without, relating to social goals, or targets? I think that's where the big problem is, and not in that fiscal choice or in one financial choice or other. The question is, is there a discussion regarding those social goals? But I actually have a question to the Van Leer plan. What I read about Ireland lately talks of changing the perception in terms of taxes and investments. And they actually, by changing their fiscal policy drastically and their whole taxes policy, they were able to draw in companies and there was some sort of a uniformity about the taxes, and they were able to unite various taxes. And did you deliberate such tactics? What are the benefits of this? What are the disadvantages of it? Okay, let's talk about, again, making the desert bloom. We have goals that I would say somehow parallel to that. So if you can say compromise on, improving the situation in the periphery, you don't have to necessarily build more. Let's first deal with what we have, and after we deal with what we have, and after we make the periphery accessible to the central part of Israel, and we put in resources there for the benefit of the population, and then we'll be able to think about new settlements within the periphery. Same goes for 20 students per classroom. Of course, that 35 is not an optimal number. But again, I don't know if this is on par with different studies, if the size of the classroom affects achievements or not. There's no uniform result. But what is clear to me, that what I see from my grandchildren, that those big classrooms at the age of 3, when there are 35 kids in a classroom, it's not optimal, that I know. Again, without any study to back me up, we would like to see less, again, students or pupils in a classroom, especially in early childhood. As far as Ireland is concerned, I think that there is, a dispute about corporate tax, as far as I'm concerned. And I think Ireland has, again, drawn its investment in high tech through corporate tax, which is very low. That's how it draws in companies. I think that all in all, the population there, I heard this on a radio show, on a TV show about Ireland not long ago. They said as follows. There was a reform in the tax system. I'm not familiar with all the details. I do know that corporate tax, low corporate tax, again, it's not open to public dispute. Everybody agrees, from the right and from the left, that corporate tax should be low, and it's okay for Ireland. It's not the situation in Israel, by the way. There are so many more disputes here than there are in Ireland. But with that, Ireland has to compensate itself for, again, the losses from, again, for the income from corporate tax. It has to compensate itself through different types of taxes. And what the government did of late, it did increase the tax burden in order to increase its receipts, its income, in order to deal with the expenditure and not to reach a deficit. So, and they understood that corporate tax is good. To lower the corporate tax is good. It draws people. And there is a public that's willing to pay the price by means of different tax. And that discrepancy, what is lost through income of corporate tax. Especially, again, when you bring into account how it affects general income and investments in general. So I can't tell you that I'm an expert on the Irish tax system. I do know the combination is completely different. They have a whole different setup and a different perception than what we have here in Israel. And I'll conclude there. So I'll relate again to the big questions that were raised here. The government has undergone change, quite a big change in recent years. And it deals with the big questions, formally speaking. If you're interested, why don't you go into, again, in the website of the National Council for Economy. There's a whole new strategy that's displayed there. We actually created a strategic, economic, social strategy for the state. We try to identify different areas. And lo and behold, we decided to focus on the social aspects as well. I think that about, 68 years, we've been talking about making the desert bloom and flourish and developing the periphery. It is a very big challenge, though. Not only in Israel is it a problem and a challenge, but all over the world. The whole issue of developing peripheral areas is a huge challenge. There are whole processes of urbanization, centralization of population. They're difficult. They're happening. We have to, try to deal with it. It's not hard. If you look at big things that have happened, again, IDF has moved its bases to the Negev. It's funny to even tell you this, to be sitting here and telling you these are big things are happening. Beersheba is in a good place today. And today, the north is identified by ourselves as a very weak area that we have to deal with. And one of the things that came up in the previous assessment that we did with the government about a year ago, there was a plan to have a strategic plan for the north. It's underway. I do hope that in the coming month it will be executed. Things are happening. We are thinking about the bigger questions and the bigger echoes. The whole, when you talk about classroom size, it costs money. Sorry to spoil it for you, but it does cost. To bring down the classroom size. You talked about 20 students or so. It's such a huge expense that if something that economists know how to do, it's again cost and benefit, and they've done it. And from all the different things that can be done in education, it seems, or what comes out, that in terms of cost benefit, diminishing classroom size is not it's not top of the list, let's put it that way. And that is why it's not being done. Although, again, the steps have been taken in this direction as well. So these are things that we constantly ask ourselves. The answers are not always so easy. We don't always have the answers, like developing the periphery. We haven't been quite successful with that over time. And most countries have not been successful and have not been able to do this from the top. As far as social targets are concerned, and this is a very important topic that came up, first of all, there are social targets, and there were in the past as well. There was a social economic agenda, poverty goals that were achieved, by the way. And there are some other goals in terms of employment till 2020, because that is the focus of the government at the moment in terms of employment. I think there is room to think of more targets, maybe specifically about productivity and salary and income, because again, the focus in recent years was to bring up the rate of employment. For example, the Arab sector, the ultra-Orthodox sector, we still have to deal with that, and ultra-Orthodox men and Arab women. We're not quite on par with those goals that we set. We still have to think of that. It's a very big challenge. Big step that was taken in this direction in recent years, and that is also something that you can see on our website of the Council and other ministries is quality of life. Today we understand we actually developed a big index, not of targets, but of indices measuring quality of life. And as far as the Bureau of Statistics the Central Bureau of Statistics is concerned, they have developed a number of indices that measure this, and we're right in the forefront of the OECD. And again, later on we can set goals after we have measured ourselves, but we are taking the right steps. I'm definitely partner to this public debate. On the one hand, I would like to argue with what Shmuel says, that the political body, again, the political echelon has decided. So what is our role here as a civil society or experts? What is left for us to do? We are here because we understand that the fiscal laws and rules decided by the state have economic impact. And over time, changes do take, whether they're gradual, whether it's long-term, whatever it may be. There is a certain direction that has been taken, and this direction is, direction is basically one of privatization, and the state is doing this. With a political decision of the public, does it mean that we say we give the state a carte blanche? Probably not. Because fact is that the word social has become very, very popular, and as far as political statements are concerned, and everything is so dynamic. I think Leer is right in saying that the debate here that has been taking place since setting again that goal of expenditure of 1%, things did have an impact. And even the things that the Bank of Israel have written as a financial goal for the state, it has had an impact. The bank has also said that the public expenditure is not enough. So if I may, I would like to relate to the question of the bigger projects. So we are having a bit of a dry spell at the moment, that is true. But it sounds like, what are we talking about? But I think we have to understand that what is happening when things do undergo privatization. I think the ability of the government to execute and to initiate that is decreased, that is undermined. So the question is, why should we build one train track? Why does it takes according to plans it takes 6 years, when even poorer countries than we are and in cities that are less developed than Tel Aviv, built a subway and a few lines over a number of years, and that was the end of that. There's something in the government's ability to actually do and execute that the whole process of privatization has undermined. This, of course, connects to legalization of things or whatever it may be. But I think some of the things we're trying to do, we didn't really speak of it at the moment, but we would like to strengthen the public sector. By strengthening the public sector, inter alia, let's say in health, in education, all these areas, or even through that trend of privatization, I think that is a subtext of what we are saying here. True. The government has taken privatization of things. We would like the government to take care of health, of education. We don't want to see private health coming in instead, or private education coming instead of a government health or education. Okay, a question for Dr. Shmuel. Maybe you can relate again to the council's as to the inheritance tax. Can you relate to that? What is the council's point of view on that? I just want to relate to again the discussion of budgets. Two things were said here. We talked about the budget, the previous budget discussion. When you talk about a budget and you present it, it's not enough to just talk about the shekels. You have to come up and say what the output would be, how the improvement in services, the social economic map that will be created as a result of the suggested budget. So again, that relates to the state. And I also imagine that in Van Leer's plan, we will find such indices on the internet, I imagine. The second thing, would be very interesting to have a comparison between the socio-economic map in Israel, again, in accordance with the politicians' proposal, we shouldn't bring up taxes, and Van Leer's proposal. Only if we see the difference in that mapping out of the different proposal, we'll be able to see if it's worth our while to bring up taxes a little. And I'm no doubt that we should bring it up a little, because I think the output or the yield would be bring a huge improvement in our economical growth. You are presenting the budget. I understand that. What about the other side? Where's the income coming from? And from what was said here, if the decisions are political decisions, and if the intention, again, if the intention to privatize, if it's lagging behind and very slow, and if I take the example from the Ministry of Transportation to privatize the schools, you can go to the Ministry of Interior and you can privatize the whole weapons, private weapons issue. And you can continue and you can bring in so much income for the state. Let's privatize everything till the very end. The other side is missing. Where's the money coming from? So I think that first we have to see what we have in our hands, what our sources are, sources of income. Only then can we plan a budget. So when the decisions are political decisions, then the whole economic budget issue, it just becomes a matter of clerks and clerkship, that's all. as to the question of how the social map, what the social map will look like if we implement our recommendations, at least some of them, then I must say that this time we didn't hold such an assessment, but we do have assessments regarding separate steps that should be taken. We can know, for example, that if we expand the negative income tax plan, how much it can, reduce the discrepancies or the poverty, and how many families it can affect. Same goes for complementary income. There are certain areas that the work that is required has to be more methodical, more encompassing, and it also relies on various directives. For example, if we improve the level of health in Israel, then we do presume that the quality of health has an effect on capital, on human capital, and on quality of life of the individual. It's difficult to maybe assess or measure this, but when I talk about human capital, this affects productivity, of course. Again, we didn't really conduct a very encompassing study, but every year we do focus on one area, and we talk about its impacts. We assess it by inequality and poverty. And I'll give you an example from the past 2 years. Last year, we related for benefits, tax benefits for pension. We described the system. We held a comparison. What is the custom in other countries? And we also handed in a proposal to cut on benefits. It wasn't a big sum, $1.5 billion shekels. And what would be the implications of this? Who would pay the price and who would benefit from it? Or when we talked of expanding that negative income tax plan, we talked about it in comparison to a different track or alternative political means of, bringing up the child benefits. And we talked about expenditure, costs. We talked about the implication of this in terms of work and how it can impact the social picture as well, and what is more beneficial. I can't tell you that we actually have this whole overall encompassing picture. It's even difficult in terms of research to deal with all these areas, and that is why we always have to sort of limit our forecast. What about income? He asked about income. Okay, we presented a list of sources for funding, again, this increase in public expenditure. We said, let's bring up taxes. We don't have any other sources. Besides the fact that we are taking from some place and putting it someplace else. We do believe that by means of this proposal, where you are bringing up expenditure and bringing up taxes, this has two positive impacts. First of all, it impacts growth, at least in the short term. Bringing up expenditure impacts positive growth in the short term, even more so than bringing up taxes. And in terms of this just of social allocation and distributive justice, I think every economist relates to this, not only in terms of the level of income, but how it is distributed. So that is what we can propose at the moment. Again, it's not very popular among many bodies. I've said this already. And I said we will try and convince different entities, as we've done in the past. So let me relate to a few things. First of all, when I said this is a political discussion, I didn't mean to say that the discussion has no value. Of course not. And I conveyed my appreciation to Van Leer as well. But what I wanted to say, that there's also a limit to how we as economists can, at the end of the day, decide which way to go. Some economists will say one thing, others will say something else. we just have to sort of do the social framing, but the fact that I didn't say that it's, it's political, of course it does not negate its importance, of course. And if people can say and pinpoint and tell us where we can bring up the expenditure or decrease expenditure, of course we should do it. As to privatization, I'm a little more skeptical with regards to this almost sort of, nostalgia that we feel. I don't even think that in Israel, of course, it's very complex. And of course, there are places where privatization is problematic, I would say. However, in terms of transportation, that you brought as an example, I think that the attempt in Israel, what we've done in Israel, has actually shown us that in many instances where things were privatized, there was great success. In comparison to bring up taxes, we're talking about a subway that was supposed to underground, that was supposed to take place in times of Prime Minister Golda. It didn't happen, and it's so hard to promote processes in the public sphere. But in transportation, as far as transportation is concerned, working with the private sector, I think is a great thing. It's been successful. Maybe in other areas less so. But today, the Prime Minister's office, people are sitting and breaking their heads absolutely, thinking where the border should be. The answer is not a simple one. It's complex. And never just, discuss privatization versus non-privatization, in the entire ecosystem where there is competition and no competition. I mean, there are so many other questions that come up, and they are all complex. So I have to, agree about that public sector. Maybe they are one that is definitely one of the growth engines of Israel, that the public sector. And if we are able to improve the public sector, we'll do great things for growth, for welfare. We asked about the estate tax, that inheritance tax. I don't think we have a formal point of view or approach. We've just been thinking about it. Things that come up in the Trachtenberg committee, that maybe there was the last committee that actually dealt with it professionally, I think. They tried to ask if there should be any state tax. It was on the table. They examined it. They discussed it. They decided that the benefit from such a move would be better, more than the cost. The benefit would be as lower than the cost. So many states, even Scandinavian states, they actually cancel the estate tax, like Norway. So it's a tax that I'm not sure would achieve what we would like it to achieve. There are a lot of ideas that are still we're being toyed with. That might be a type of alternative to estate tax, but nothing concrete at the moment. You talked about taxation. Again, I said what our approach is, that at least in the current situation today, given the fact that we can choose between taxes and a deficit, as far as putting the shekel there or there, I imagine it's better not to bring up taxes at the moment, because the implication it has on growth, even in the short term. There is consensus in literature that in the short term, taxation does not encourage growth. It undermines growth. So at the moment, it would be better, I think, to, again, tackle it from a point of view of deficit, again, with the maneuver that we have with that debt product ratio that we have at the moment. Sorry, into the mic, please. I have just a number of remarks. I very much identify with your remark about the politics of this. It is a political discussion. We are part of it, but it is a political discussion, and I think we have to say this quite openly. There were elections a year ago, and I don't remember that one of the parties claimed that we have to bring up government expenditure or bring up taxes or whatever it may be. So we would like to have an impact on this as well. As to international comparisons, I'm not sure if we're not at on that edge, on that wild edge, so to speak, as far as poverty is concerned, we are very far removed from any other country that we would like to emulate. I even think that this move, again, bringing down that product debt ratio from 60 to 50%, I think that is a very exceptional step to take. What's happening around the world is hardly similar to what we are suggesting here. As far as education is concerned, sorry, that's why I think those international comparisons are very useful, very helpful. By the way, as far as the classroom size is concerned, we're also out of the scale. We're out of range. There are countries in Asia with very big classrooms, but it's a different cultural setting. If we compare ourselves to Europe, I don't think there are any other countries, definitely not in Western Europe, that have classroom sizes like in Israel. I don't even suggest that we ask economists what is the optimal classroom size, because the advantages of a classroom size are not economic. It has to do with development for the child, and those who have kids and grandchildren know this, understand that there is an advantage that if a kid who is 6 or 7 or 8 years old studies in a classroom where a teacher can pay attention to each and every one, there is a need for this. Or if you need special ed, it's just better to have a smaller classroom. Yes, it's very expensive. You are right. Whether it, again, whether this, if it deserves the money or not, I don't think economists have to answer that question. As to the final point, you make a comparison. You know, everyone chooses the most convenient point of comparison. But of course, if there was a decrease in government expenditure in the middle of the millennium, but now there is an amendment. But now it's from the salary of teachers. It got to such a low degree of 4,000 shekels a month for teachers. And even after there were additions, they now earn about 6,000 shekels as a minimal salary. It's not enough. They would like to draw, the high-quality teachers, and it's impossible. So we'll be taking a break now.